I need to. Okay.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the third session of Tipping the Balance of Change Motivational Interview Training. I know that some of you have watched the first two webinars. Some of you have missed a webinar in between, and maybe this is, for some of you, this might be your first session. I just want to let you know that I will be recapping sessions 1 and 2 as we start this morning. But also, the Parents as Teachers organization now has the first 2 links up on their site, and we have that in the chat box, the link to the first 2 webinars. All 4 webinars will eventually be on that site, but this is just great information to come back to kind of time and time again. As I've said before on the webinars, the motivational interview training does not occur in this hour and a half that we're going to be together on the webinar. It actually occurs when you are out in the field working with your families, with your clients, whoever is on the other end of this. Actually, when you're talking to your husband, maybe even at home. Motivational interviewing training occurs in the field. So I want to let you know that if there have been any successes in the last couple of weeks, or if there have been any frustrations, I'd love to be able to hear about those as well, because that is how I gear my training. This is the first time that I've ever done a webinar series, but when I'm actually face-to-face, it's really nice to be able to answer those questions that everybody has. So if you do ever get a chance to go to a face-to-face motivational interview training, I suggest that you take that opportunity. So this is who I am, for those of you who haven't seen me before, or I try to pick a different picture every time to show different sides of who I am. But I am classically trained as a microbiologist, worked as a medical technologist in clinical laboratory for 32 years, and then I turned into a life coach, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, that I do get to use all sides of my brain for sure. And now, for the last 7 years, I've been doing motivational interview training, and I just love it. I think that any time that we get a chance to multiply who we are and our passions, that is exactly where we're supposed to be in life. So I hope that you're all getting that opportunity to find your passion and be able to multiply that with the families that you're working with. I do want to just remind you as well that it is very important to be fully engaged with the people that you're working with. And it's also really important to be fully engaged today. So if you could just turn off your cell phones for an hour and a half, close your emails, not be tempted to look at those things during our webinar, that is going to be great. Get a pen and paper in hand, and make sure that you have your materials in front of you. And oh, I see that I forgot to add my materials in there in this slide. So let me just tell you what you should have in front of you. You should have the participant guide for session 3. That is a 9-page document. Hopefully you have that printed out. All of the slides are going to be on that. And then also a document called Forward Moving Reflections. We're going to go through that today. And then another document called the Decisional Balance Chart. And we may or may not get to that today. We have a ton of information to get through today. This will truly feel like a class today. And your head may be spinning just a little bit when we're done with today. My head was spinning as I was putting the information together. So we'll just see how far we can get, and then we do have one more webinar next Thursday at this same time from 9 to 10:30 to be able to wrap that up. So just make sure that you do have that pen and paper, and hopefully those documents in front of you as well. Our training objectives today are to review sessions 1 and 2. And session 1 was the foundations of motivational interviewing, and then last week we talked about session 2, which was wrapped up in the acronym of OARS. So talking about open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. We didn't quite get to summarizing last week, so I'm going to recap what summarizing is, and then we're going to go forward with work on reflections. Reflective listening is the most important part of a motivational interviewing, and it is probably the hardest part of motivational interviewing to actually get down and get right. So we are going to go through that extensively today. Also, we're going to learn to elicit change talk. And change talk is that talk that you hear in somebody's speech that indicates movement forward in their thinking or movement forward in their action. And then, of course, we want to identify your own strengths and learning needs. I've said before that motivational interviewing isn't rocket science. We all do a lot of this in our everyday life. However, with motivational interviewing, it's putting it into a strategized conversation to be able to allow the client to be able to hear themselves. So let's look back at the assignments that you had from week 2. If you have that information in front of you, I would suggest that if you haven't done this already, that you put a folder together with all of the information and the pages that we have been going through with motivational interviewing, and have those in front of you every time that we have a webinar. So from session 2, we had the closed and open-ended questions assignment, also the affirmation scenarios assignment, and then the reflective listening and change talk assignments. First of all, let's just look through the closed and open-ended questions assignments. If you don't have these in front of you, don't fret. You'll still get this information. I'm just going to go through a couple of scenarios here, a couple of questions, and answer them. So on the closed and open-ended questions assignment, there were 10 questions on there, and I had you ask or find out if those were closed or open-ended questions. And if it was a closed-ended question, I wanted you to write it as an open-ended question. Any closed-ended question that we ask can also be opened up. So let's look at the question that I had down for question number 3. Have you ever tried to quit smoking in the past? Question, is that closed or is that open? That is a closed-ended question. That is, Sherry here, right next to me, answered that correctly. It is a closed-ended question. Anytime you put have you, should you, could you, did you, are you in front of a sentence, it makes it a closed-ended question, and we talked about this last time. Sometimes they can even sound very judgmental. So in order to open that question up, you could say something like, tell me about your past quit attempts. That's not even a question. That's more just a statement. So anytime that you have a closed-ended question, if you look down to number 10 on here, it says, tell me more. Tell me more is I call it your get out of jail free card. So anytime you're kind of struggling in your conversation and you're wondering, hey, how am I going to get more information? Tell me more is a great way to interject in there. Now, you don't want to say that like every time you ask them something or have it 10 times in a conversation, because that's going to sound very clinical. And so that's why we have reflective listening, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit here. Let me just go to another question. So you didn't make it to school again, huh? That's a question. Just by putting that huh on the end makes it sound very judgmental, and the way that I asked the question sounded very judgmental again. So instead of saying, so you didn't make it to school again, huh? You could say something like, how was school today? Or tell me about your new teacher. Something like that, to be able to open that up and open up that conversation. That is what you want to do, is not allow somebody to have a way to have a yes or no answer. I'm going to just leave that assignment there. If any of you have not received these pages, please just let us know. You can just write that in chat. If you have any questions, please write that in chat as well, and we will get these assignments to you. The next one was the affirmation scenarios assignment, and I put down several scenarios that you may or may not deal with. And I wanted you to think of ways that you could affirm this person. So I'll just read the first one. Sierra is a 5th grader who's been in trouble for bullying other students at school. She's a good athlete and she wants to play basketball, but her parents have told her that she can't play until she changes her attitude. She has apologized to the other students to try to get on the team, but she's still exhibiting anger. Okay, so here we've got a kid who is bullying maybe thinks that she's better than other kids, or maybe is very insecure, and so that's why she's bullying. And she is exhibiting some signs of anger, and her parents are doing the right thing by disciplining her and telling her that, until you can't do this thing that you love, until, you figure out how to be nice, basically. So ways to affirm her would be, wow, this is something that you really love. I can see that you want to change your attitude so that you can play basketball. That was awesome that you apologized to the other students. So even though this isn't the best scenario yet, and she hasn't exhibited change yet, there's many things that she has been doing, even if it wasn't in honesty, really, with the apologizing to the other students, that you can still affirm that. And when we affirm someone, it makes them lift their head a little bit more, pull their shoulders back a little bit more, maybe have more eye contact with you. And affirmations really help to increase trust in a conversation. So it's important that even if everything else just seems like cruddy and you really can't find anything good, that you can see inside of someone and affirm them for who they are. And then with reflective listening and change talk assignment, we are going to go over this a lot more today, but this assignment was very, very important to be able to look at some of these statements that you may hear, recognize change talk in that, and then reflect that change talk back. So I'm just going to read one of them here. I love my baby, but she cries all the time, and she's keeping my 3-year-old up too. I know it will get better, but we're all worn out and cranky right now. So I love my baby. That's a great piece of change talk. She's not resenting her baby for this. Also, I know things will get better. That's a piece of change talk that you can reflect. So you can reflect this back as, it's pretty tough right now. And you can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, that's a great way to reflect both sides of what she's feeling right now. And putting the word "and" in that sentence instead of a "but" is very, very important for letting somebody see both sides of their ambivalence. Okay, now down on question number 6. This one may sound like something that's very, very resistant. You might be good at helping some people, but not me. I can help myself. Wow, where's the change talk in that? You might be good at helping some people, but not me. I can help myself. To me, this sounds like a very self-reliant person. This sounds like somebody who can figure out life on their own, and they want to be able to do that. They're bugged with so many other people trying to speak into their lives when they really can try to figure it out on their own. So to be able to reflect change talk and really affirm this person at the same time, you could say something like, you want to do this on your own. There's a way that you want to figure this out that's on your own. And see, those aren't questions that I'm asking back. Those are affirming in this person that they have a strength within them. Parents as teachers is all about strength-based information, and so is motivational interviewing. So to be able to pull out a strength is really important as you're talking about reflections and change talk. We're going to work more on this today. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you there, but I just wanted to briefly go through those last assignments. I hope that you all had a chance to do them. So is there any questions or comments about the assignments from last week? And I'll just kind of leave the air here for about 30 seconds if anybody has any questions or comments about the assignments, or maybe about taking this into the field last week and trying to really use these techniques that we've been learning. Do you have any comments on those? You could leave that. I always do hate to leave dead air too, so we talked about that last week. the importance of silence in our conversations, and how that's a way to increase change talk in a conversation, is to leave silence. Because the next person that talks in a conversation is the one that directs the conversation. And if you're the one to speak next, then you're the one directing. And what we want in motivational interviewing is for the client, the family member, to be able to direct the conversation. So being comfortable enough with yourself to be able to leave silence is very, very important. I like to think of motivational interviewing as a big piece of duct tape that you can just put over your mouth. To let other people hear themselves is such a gift. All right, it doesn't look like there's any comments or questions, but please, if you have anything throughout the sessions or you're really wondering about something that I've said, please put that question out there, and I'd love to be able to answer it in real time. Okay, so the primary goals of motivational interviewing are to minimize resistance. We are going to talk about rolling with resistance next week, and I know that that's something that we all deal with, and it's something that all gives us that deer in the headlights look, like, where do I go from here? So please join us next week to talk about rolling with resistance and resistance busting techniques. Also, eliciting change talk is huge. To explore and resolve ambivalence, this is where somebody is trying to decide between change and no change. So on one hand, they want to change, and on the other hand, they don't want to change. And we've all been there. In fact, all of us are there in many areas of our life right now. So we wanted to be able to create and amplify those discrepancies between where that person is right now and their broader goals or values. And I have a values assignment that I use as a life coach. And I'm kind of surprised about how many people have never really thought about what their values are. And if we are working outside of our values, if we're living outside of the values that we have consciously or unconsciously placed in our lives, if we're not living within those values, we're going to feel very uncomfortable, and things just aren't going to seem right in our lives. So to give people the opportunity to know what their values are is really, really important. Next week, I will send that assignment out that I use with my life coaching clients for them to be able to determine what their values are. It's also important to be able to change perspective. Most people think about the negative side of change. They think about, we all have this stinking thinking kind of attitude at times. And so to be able to change perspective and be able to bring positivity to something new in someone's life, again, is really a gift. And then nurturing hope and confidence is huge. When we can be able to look into someone and truly say to them, you know what, I see more in you than you can see in yourself. That, again, is a way to be able to have somebody sit up and be affirmed, and they can have more confidence to move forward and make these changes in their lives. This is huge, this motivational mountain. So this is the stages of change model, the Prochaska changes of stage model, which we usually see in a circle from pre-contemplation, around the circle, through contemplation to preparation, action, maintenance. Relapse is in there as well, until we get to this stable and improved lifestyle and actually make that change. But I have put this onto a mountain where contemplation is on the left side. Pre-contemplation starts at the bottom. Contemplation is on the left side. And then we move to preparation, action, maintenance, and of course we've got that relapse phase in there as well. You can see that contemplation is the largest stage of trying to make a change in our lives. And some people stay in contemplative stage their whole life and they never make the change. We have been talking completely so far, and we will again today, talking about the left side of the mountain. Next week, we are going to talk about commitment. So forming commitments and forwarding the action and brainstorming and helping them create these changes in their lives, which is what our normal tendency is. If you see that green line that goes through this mountain, if you have somebody who is in a lower stage of contemplation and you are just trying to give them the action steps to help them change, you have missed at least half of the motivation to help them complete that action. So this is what usually happens, let's say in a doctor's office where somebody is given a prescription to, you need to go out and lose 10 pounds. Wow, that's not very good contemplation to create the action that that medical professional is wanting. There needs to be a lot more put in this person's life to be able to make the commitment so that they can come down the other side of the mountain. So these are important steps to be able to take. We are talking today about completing these contemplation steps and helping them get up this mountain so that they can have more commitment to change than they did when they walked into that conversation with you. So if somebody's about a 25% contemplator and you talk to them and they walk out of there a 75% contemplator, that is a great conversation. Even though they haven't made that commitment to change yet, you have certainly been a link in the chain to be able to create that action. Nobody wants to be fixed. So when somebody comes into a conversation and they are in one of these stages of contemplation and you simply give them action stage, or you tunnel across this mountain, that's what I call it, to get to the preparation phase, and they haven't really gone up here yet, this is called fixin'. That you just want to give them the action steps to fix them, and nobody wants to do that. It's going to cause resistance in your conversations. So resist your own writing reflex. Resist your own need to fix things, to set someone straight, to get them to face reality, or to jump to that action planning. And this might be, again, one of the hardest parts of motivational interviewing is not wanting to jump right to that action planning stage. Now, for some people, it takes 3 minutes to get up that other side of the mountain, and they're ready to step into preparation. They've already thought about this thing before, and you might be just the last link in the chain that's ready to get them down the other side of the mountain, or they might just be starting to think about this thing and not ready to move yet. And that might take a couple of weeks to get them to do that. Patience is so important in motivational interviewing. We're going to jump back and just talk about the basics of motivational interviewing. The foundation of motivational interviewing is vastly important, and that is to have empathy, to have respect for the person, to be able to be a trusting person in that conversation. Those are all the foundations, not of what we do, but of who we are in a conversation. So if you do all of these things really good, you ask great open-ended questions, you affirm, and you reflect really, really well, and you have great summaries, but you're very judgmental in your conversation and the person is picking up on that, it's still not going to do really much good in that conversation. It is really important to put aside our agendas, our need to fix, our judgmental attitudes, and be able to put those aside so that we can use the skills of motivational interviewing very well. So we're just going to go through these skills really quick so that I can get to the increased reflection exercises that we need to get to today. The art of questioning. Powerful questioning is the ability to ask questions that reveal the greatest information, not for your sake, not because you need the information, but it's for the maximum benefit of the client, which is very, very important. Yesterday, I love how I always just have examples that come to me within 24 hours of doing these webinars. I was working with a mom who she's constantly doing some kind of diet, Jenny Craig, and it's always these, canned diets where she really hates the food and it's not really good, and then she continues to get chips for her kids and because that's what they want to eat. And it has never really worked, and she keeps going in these cycles and these cycles and these cycles. And so she started to talk about a diet again and talking about that the girls that are 13 years old need to be on a diet. And I said, tell me what comes to your mind when you think of the word diet. And I kind of stopped the entire conversation, and she said, it means that I'm depriving myself. And then I asked her the question, so you want that for your girls? That wasn't a question. That was more of a reflection. And in that moment, there was a maximum benefit for her because she started to realize that not only was she depriving herself, she was teaching her girls at 13 years old that it was really good to deprive yourself of what is good and natural foods. So we got into a conversation then about nutrition and what it means to actually have a lifestyle change around eating good foods, and it starts in the grocery store. And so she was making up a grocery list of the good things that she wanted to get when she went to the grocery store, and it brought about a whole new conversation. But that was for the maximum benefit of her. That question didn't benefit me. So these open-ended questions invite conversations. And the language that we use, I wasn't judgmental when I asked her that question or when I reflected back. I simply, reflected back what I was seeing in her and what she really wanted, what was best for her family. And then you want to use exploring questions and statements to gather more information about the client and maybe to gather more information about what the client wants for themselves. And then we've got these affirmations. Affirmations really are helping a person see the strengths within themselves. And just simple things. Thank you for being so honest with me. I really like the way that you said that. At the end of a conversation, if you're really seeing something else in somebody else, I'm really confident that you can do this in your life. Those kind of affirmations are huge. And just small words like, wow, that's great, awesome. You want to be very genuine with your affirmations, and you want them to be low frequency so that they can have a high potency. Being a cheerleader throughout the conversation does not have nearly the impact as finding a few small affirmations throughout the conversation and being able to reflect that back to the person. It's huge to be able to do that. Reflective listening is building your guessing muscle. And so when I said back to the mom yesterday, so this is what you want for your girls, I was guessing at that this may have an impact for her, but I was also guessing that in the back of her mind that may have been an unconscious thought for her, but it now became conscious. And so it really made her think differently about using her own words and how her own actions might be affecting her girls. So I was guessing at that. That statement could have caused more resistance in the conversation, or it could have really brought that unconscious thought to the forefront of what she was actually thinking. And in either case, the conversation is going to go forward, okay? I can't be wrong with a reflection. I can be wrong in what I think about what I've reflected, but in that case, the client is going to tell me. Therefore, that reflection just became right because it is going to help me stay on the same page as the client. So it summarizes what the person is saying. It summarizes what the person may be feeling. So it is a great way to get to emotions in a conversation as well. Reflective listening involves a different way of gaining information from a client. Mostly we think about asking questions to gain information from a client. But questions can increase resistance in your conversations. So reflect, 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 reflect. Especially when resistance is high in a conversation, continue to reflect. Your voice inflection goes down when you're reflecting. If your voice inflection goes up at the end of the statement, it means that you've asked a question, not created a statement. So you want to keep your tone down. You want to amplify the meaning or the feeling. And especially you want to help a client hear their own change talk, the things that they want to happen in their lives. And I'm telling you, this reflective listening takes some hard work and practice on your part. It doesn't happen overnight. But the more that you start to use motivational interviewing, the more you're going to start using reflective listening statements, and the more you're going to feel that comfort in your conversations as well. Now, a summary, which is what we didn't get to, the part of the S on ORS last week. So ORS is open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. And summarizing is simply a glorified reflection. I'm sorry, I made another typo there. That should be reflection, not refection. Sorry, I will change that later. But it's a glorified reflection stating what you have heard, felt, or identified from the client so far in the conversation. So you want to use summaries frequently throughout the conversation to avoid assumptions. And summaries help you to gather the material that's already been reflected in the conversation and then reflect that back to the patient, or the person, the family, the clients, whatever word you need to put in there. And then you want to bring forth their strengths, diminish the barriers, and stress change talk when you bring forth these summaries. It draws together the information and it helps you transition to a new task. So when you're summarizing, you might do this every 3 to 4 minutes in a conversation, and you can say something like, so what I've heard you say so far, or let me see if I have this right. And then you're going to bring through everything that you've seen in the conversation. Let me see if you have this right. You really want to make a lifestyle change for you and your family. You've really gone on a lot of these what we call diets before, and you're starting to realize that a diet that's temporary isn't something that you really want for you and your family. You want to learn about nutrition. You want your girls to learn about what is right and what's going to be healthy for their bodies. And now, maybe you're wondering, how do I make this change happen? Okay, so that was a summary of the mom that I just talked about that I worked with yesterday. None of that was a question. Even the summary at the end wasn't a question. I simply put a statement in there, so you're wondering how you can make this change happen. Instead of saying, so are you wondering how you can make this change happen? Because now that might be trying to go to the fix. That might be going to the action planning stage too quickly. I want that mom to tell me when she's ready to go to the action planning stage. Now, the final summary that you leave with the person that you're talking to is going to be the message that you want to leave them with. A lot of times at the end of my conversations, I will say something like, so what did you hear in our conversation today? And I will let them summarize what they've heard, because that's what's important. That's a very, very good way to end your conversations. Tell me what you've learned today. And you know what? They may have learned something that you didn't even say, because their perceptions are different than what you're saying. I've asked that question lots of times, and I'm like, wow, you got that out of our conversation today? And that's kind of neat. That's when I know that there is really something more than me going on in the conversation. There is something going on in this person where they are really putting their own thoughts and ideas into what we've been talking about. Okay, so that is a brief synopsis, and I know that I could have gone into that a lot deeper, even that I didn't even have the foundations of motivational interviewing up there. But we really do need to move forward and talk more about reflections and forward-moving reflections today, and change talk as well, as far as we can get into this. So these are some reflections. Hey, you might hear this from a person. I know I should quit smoking, but right now I just have too much stress to even think about it. You know, we usually would look at this statement and say, oh, this person is so resistant. This person is somebody who just doesn't want to change. They don't get it. But when we look at this, we can see huge change talk in this. First of all, they said, I know I should quit. I know I should quit smoking. Boom. That just gave you an indicator. What is inside of this person? There is some motivation, there is some knowledge, there is some thought that they know that they should quit. And then the next statement after the but, okay, so you see a but there, a but or a should, which you see both of those in this statement, will always indicate that a person is in a contemplative stage of change. This is not a pre-contemplative person. This is not a resistant person. This is a person exhibiting ambivalence. And ambivalence means if you were to put both of your hands up right now and have them go up and down like a scale, this person is weighing whether they should quit or not. And the but in the middle of that sentence is a fulcrum, like on a teeter-totter. It's the middle of the teeter-totter. I know I should quit smoking on one end of the teeter-totter, but right now I just have too much stress to even think about it. That's on the other end of the teeter-totter. So some reflections. I'm wondering if just really quick we can just get a couple of people in chat to put some thoughts about what are some of the reflections. How might you reflect this back to the person? And as we're waiting for some of those to come in, I just want you to know that the way I reflect is not going to be the way you reflect. And neither of us are going to be wrong. Remember, you could never be wrong with a reflection. You can only gain more information from the person. There might be 100 different ways to reflect this. So our first reflection from Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer. When do you think your stress will lessen? Okay, let me just keep that one on the table. We have another one from Renee. I understand you want to quit smoking, and that's awesome. What are some ways you can reduce your stress so you'd be in a better position to quit? These are both great, great examples. Okay, and Kim also said, so it sounds like smoking is a way you relieve stress. These are all good, and I've got some great examples here. Thank you, Irina. It sounds like you want to quit, and you have a lot of stress in your life right now. Excellent. Okay, let me address first Jennifer. So we have, I know I should quit smoking, but right now I just have too much stress to even think about it. And Jennifer said a good way to reflect that might be, when do you think your stress will lessen? This is a great, great example of what we normally want to do to get more information, because this is a question, not a reflection. You even put a question mark when you put it in chat. There's a question mark at the end of that statement. When do you think your stress will lessen? Okay, also this is a closed-ended question. I don't mean to pick on you, Jen, but this is what I get all the time, because this is how we normally answer. So thank you for putting this in there. When do you think your stress will lessen? Tomorrow? Never. When I get a job? Okay, so this invites a short answer. So it's a closed-ended question. And it's not that it's wrong. That could really be a way to gain information depending on where we're at. But now we are forming some reflections. All right? So Renee said, I understand that you want to quit smoking, and that's awesome. What are some of the ways that you can reduce your stress so you'd be in a better position to quit? This is very, very good. Thank you, Renee, for putting this. However, when you're using reflections, let that reflection do the work. So this is a tendency that I have, that I really need to work on, is I make a really nice reflection, and then I follow it up immediately with a question. And what that does is it stops that reflection from doing the work that it was intended to do. You might be able to gather some really good information from the reflection, and then once that person has reflected back to you, then answer the question. So putting a reflection and a question together it's okay, but leave the reflection be. Jennifer says, for the way that she reflected, I was thinking that she may also be caused to think about whether stress would ever not be a factor. Exactly. Exactly. And by asking the question that you asked, you may get to that information. That's awesome. But right now we're working on reflections. Okay, so we want to think about how could we reflect. All right, so let's go to Irina, who said, it sounds like you want to quit and you have a lot of stress in your life right now. What Irina did here is she reflected both sides of the ambivalence. And she put it into different words, and she put an "and" in the middle of that sentence. It sounds like you want to quit. Boom, she reflected that first side of ambivalence, took the "but" out of her sentence, changed it to an and you have a lot of stress in your life right now. So what that reflection does, is it lets this person see that both sides of ambivalence in her mind at the same time, which is called a double-sided reflection. She's reflecting both sides of ambivalence, and she's coming alongside of this person and saying, you know what, you do have a lot of stress in your life right now. And then we had another reflection of just saying that smoking is a way to reduce your stress. That's coming alongside as well. It's not a double-sided reflection, but it's a very good reflection allowing this person to see that, hey, maybe there's some other ways that I could reduce my stress other than smoking. So all very, very good ways to go through. Lori Bickford. Hi, Lori. It's good to see your name up here today. Hope you're doing good up there in northern Wyoming. What are some of the stressors that you feel that you have control over? Right, and again, this is not a bad question. You know, this is a great way maybe to get more information. However, it's still a question, and we're working with reflections. So let me turn that into a reflection. What are some of the stressors that you feel that you have control over? We could just reflect that as, so you have some stressors. So you have some stressors. Tell me about them. Okay, so here's that tell me more. It's not a question. You're going to gain more information. The shorter, the more brief that you can be in your reflections, the better. So if you can reflect in like 4 or 5 words, it's going to be much better than reflecting with like 3 or 4 sentences, because it makes it short and sweet to be able to reflect back to that person. Thank you all so much for your feedback. That really, really helps me. We're going to do one more basic reflection here, and then we're going to go into some deeper reflecting exercises. My mom and dad fight all the time. It seems like everything is falling apart. Wow, this is a tough one. You see this kid here who's just really in a depressed place, just feeling like, hey, maybe she's even a part of why her mom and dad fight all the time. This is a tough one to reflect. Let's get a couple more. How would you reflect back to this girl? Very nice. Thanks. Thanks for those reflections. Tell me more is a great one. Your mom and dad fighting makes you sad. That is a great reflection. That's called a coming alongside reflection, because what you're doing in that moment is you're letting that person be able to let them know that you heard them on more levels than just their words gave you. Let me read some of these other ones here. You're feeling discouraged because of your parents fighting. Absolutely. And discouraged. Wow. That word discouraged is huge. Because the word dis means to take away from. So when someone is discouraged, it means that we have taken away their courage. Now, unconsciously, this girl may be thinking that. Consciously, she's not thinking that. So letting her know that her courage is being taken away, wow, you can create confidence in her just by acknowledging that. So your mom and dad fight a lot, and you feel like your life's falling apart. Tell me more. That is such a safe place for this young girl, to be able to really have a place where she's not able to talk about this with her mom and dad. This is really a tough place. And so all of those ways that this was reflected are ways to gain trust with this young client, to let her know that you are hearing her in more ways than just her words, and that you want to be a confidant with her in this. So reflections are great. And a question here might be a tough place for her to answer, to just let her be in this place. Saying something like, what makes you feel sad? This is a really tough place for you right now. And you might get to a place eventually in the conversation where you're able to ask the question, what might be your part in this? But that question right now might really seem judgmental to this young girl, okay? But that might be a question that you want to get her to see that how her behaviors could be creating tension in the home. Okay? So great. You guys are doing great. Reflections are the toughest part of this. I just affirmed you, by the way. So let's keep going with reflections. There are different types of reflections. Now this is where we are going to start going deeper into reflections and how we can strategize these reflections in different parts of our conversations. So there are simple or stabilizing reflections. And a reflection, you see that mirror that I put up there. What a reflection does is it helps the words, it helps the client hear the words that they've just said. Very few people actually internalize and hear the words deeply that they have just said. And when we can put a mirror up and boom, reflect that right back to them, just like light gets reflected from a mirror, they get to hear themselves. So when somebody is resistant towards you, angry towards you, frustrated in the conversation, when we can reflect back their resistance, guess what happens in the conversation? Okay, I'll just tell you. The reflection diminishes. Because nobody wants to stay in a resistant conversation, even if it's with themselves. So when you can help them see that resistance and make them maybe feel that resistance in the conversation without letting your own resistance rise, it's a great way to be able to minimize resistance, and it's one of those rolling with resistance techniques we're going to talk about next week. Simple reflections are simply repeating back an element of what a person says, or it's rephrasing. So it's saying back what they just said, but it's using new words. These are very simple. And when somebody is highly resistant in a conversation, simple reflections are a great way to break through resistance. The next type of reflections are complex reflections. Complex reflections bring depth to your conversation. There are at least 10 ways. I listed 10. There's more of them if we really thought about it, but here is 10. Paraphrasing. So making a guess as to the unspoken meaning of what the person is saying. I'm going to go through these with an example here in just a minute. So I'm just going to go through these, but paraphrasing, making that guess as to the unspoken meaning. Reflect their feelings. So this will emphasize that emotional dimension. And when you can when you can bring forth emotion into a conversation, you are truly getting to the heart of the matter. So helping to reflect those feelings really gets deeper into the conversation. Metaphors. I love using metaphors. Hey, this is like a roller coaster for you. This is like you've been hit by a Mack truck. So picking out metaphors, I have found that clients maybe 20 minutes into the conversation will pick that metaphor back up and use it again themselves. And that's where you truly know that that metaphor was good. If somebody is a visual processor, using metaphors is a very, very good way to help them see depth in the conversations. Not everybody is a visual processor, and not everybody's going to pick up on that. But if you use a metaphor and somebody picks up on it, I would continue in your conversations to use metaphors because it means that person really gets it that way. They can see it. Continuing the paragraph. So if somebody goes through and they've just told you something about whatever in their life, you can just venture what the next sentence might be in that conversation. And remember, with a reflection, you want your voice inflection to go down. A double-sided reflection, we've already talked about that a little bit today. You're reflecting both sides of ambivalence, and you're putting an and in the sentence and not the but. When somebody puts a but in their sentence, it means that they're seeing either one side or the other side. And normally, usually, our human tendency is to see the negative side of ambivalence and to go with that, to let that weigh heavier. So when you simply put and in the sentence, it allows a person to see that these two things exist in the same plane together in their mind. And it's okay to be there. This is a great way to help resolve ambivalence, just to let them see it. More complex reflections that help to bring depth. An amplified reflection. So this says more than the client says. It heightens the meaning or the feeling. And when you're using an amplified reflection, you can get some resistance in return. Because you're saying more than they said, maybe more than they even want to hear. But it's also a great way to be able to increase their thinking process. I call this helping them to think either outside of the box or actually to help increase the size of the box of knowledge that they already have about themselves. So amplifying it really, really helps them see more about themselves. An affirmative reflection, you're amplifying back a strength. So this goes back to that those affirmations that we've been talking about and really, really letting them see that you see their strengths. Coming alongside, showing an understanding and an empathy by siding with the client. And just simply letting them say, hey, this really makes you feel sad. This is a tough place for you. I've been telling you off and on about the sisters that I have been working with. And the first conversation that I had with one of these young girls, 13-year-old, we sat there for pretty much an hour, and all she did was shrug her shoulders and say, I don't know, maybe. And it was really uncomfortable for me. I didn't know where to go, but I left a lot of silence in that conversation. And it was about 10 minutes into the conversation, and I just said to her, you really don't want to be here, do you? And she shook her head, and she looked at the ground, and she said no. And that was okay. It was okay for me to be able to say that, and it was okay for her at that moment to be able to say that. And by the end of our conversation, she was looking up at me. She had her shoulders back. She was talking a little bit more, not as much as she has the last two times we've gotten together, but she was starting to break out of the shell because there was something that she could trust about me. So that's what coming alongside does. It's a very, very powerful way to reflect emotions or what you see in another person. And then reflecting change talk. Boy, don't let change talk go by. If you hear a place of change talk, let that person hear it. It's very, very important that you let them hear something that maybe they don't hear within themselves. So don't let change talk go. And then reframe. This is where you would bring a new context to the client's words. The last type of reflection we talked about simple reflections. Those were all complex reflections. A forward-moving reflection is so important, excuse me, to be able to help you forward the action. Once you are starting to move them up that contemplative mountain and getting them towards commitment, these reflections invite the client to consider what to do next. So instead of you moving them to the preparation stage, they are starting to move themselves to the preparation stage because you're forwarding this action. We're going to work a lot on forward-moving reflections throughout today, and I'm going to hit it again next week as well. So in general, simple reflections are used early in your conversation when the meaning is less clear for you and the meaning is less clear maybe for your client, and when resistance is high. You want to be able to have simple reflections, just reflect, 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 and maybe you reflect back the exact same words that the client is saying. Break that resistance down. Deeper reflections are ventured as understanding and trust increases and the resistance decreases in your conversation. Now, how do you know if resistance is decreasing? Boy, this is where your sixth sense gets to come in. This is where you can truly feel like, okay, we're getting somewhere now. you can feel the tension kind of lessen in the room. Or I call it like a deflation. There has been a more of a calmness in your client. They are starting to have some resolve in their speech. There's not so much frustration. You're going to start hearing more change talk when resistance starts to decrease. This is where you can start to use some of those deeper reflections. And then the forward moving reflections are used to help your client consider future change. Now, if you're starting to use forward moving reflections when resistance is really high in a conversation, this might cause more resistance because they're not ready to go there yet. So this is how you can start to strategize your reflections based on what you're seeing in the clients, the words that they're using, the change talk that they're using. So reflections is something that some of you probably already do very, very well. But learning to strategize them is important with motivational interviewing. Now, we're going to form these reflections with this patient. And actually, I had this client scenario up here before I ever met with that mom yesterday, so I just stayed with the theme today. I've tried to lose weight more times than I can remember. I've lost a little bit here and there, but it always comes back on. I get really crabby when I'm dieting, and no one wants to be around me. I would like to lose weight, and I want to be able to play with my kids, and I know I'd feel better, too. I'm thinking about going on one of those low-carb diets. One of my friends did that, and it worked well. Okay, so we're going to use this scenario, and just keep this in the back of your mind. I want you to look right now at this statement. What are you hearing from this mom? I want you to think around the words, through the words. I want you to think about her attitude and her position with her girls. What are you hearing from this mom? You can just put those in the chat. Just be a few words. And maybe if somebody could just state, what stage of change is mom in? We have a great reflection, so you'd like to lose weight, and it's hard. Mom is definitely in a state of contemplation. Right, she's very ambivalent with this. I mean, if I were to put this on that scale of ambivalence or how far up the mountain she is, I've tried losing weight more times than I can remember. This is something that she really wants to do. She's learned so much from those past attempts that she's had. So she's already thought about this quite a bit. She might be pretty far up on that motivational mountain, 60, 70% up there. So you want to lose weight. You've tried many different things, and you want to be healthier for your kids. Thank you, Renee. You know what? That's a really good summary of what this mom just said. And you used the word "and" in there as well. You really want to be healthier for your children. That is an affirmation statement. That is really affirming this mom to let her know that, hey, your kids are really important to you. She's frustrated. This is another comment. She's frustrated because she's unable to keep her weight off, and she feels like it's affecting her ability to play with her kids. Right, she's frustrated. This is something that she really wants to do, and she wants to be a good mom. These are all really, this can feel like a stuck place for this mom, but she's really got some good internal and external motivators to be able to change. Okay, so all really great reflections. It's important to see this as we go forward that, hey, there's great times to ask questions and there's great times to reflect. So now that you know that what reflections are and that there's different kinds of reflections, I want to challenge you this week, instead of asking that question, I want you to form a reflection. And sometimes I'm talking to my life coaching clients and I'll ask a question, and instead I will stop and I'll say, can I please rephrase that? And I will form that then into a reflection. It's okay to admit that you've made mistakes. It's okay to backtrack in your conversation and do things that you think might be a better way to do it. In fact, that brings humility to you in your conversations, and it makes you more believable in your conversation. All right, so I am going to use this scenario, and some of you have already come up with some great ways to do those complex reflections, which is okay to do here because the resistance isn't really high here. And there is a lot of contemplation going on here, so you can use some of those complex or deeper reflections right away. So here's some repeating reflections you could use. So you want to try the low-carb diet. You want to lose weight. Very simple, very, right to the point. Rephrasing. You've tried a lot of things and nothing has worked so far. All reflections, no question marks at the end. However, look at this one. So you want to try the low-carb diet? You want to lose weight? You've tried a ton of things before and nothing has worked for you so far. Those were questions or attitude added to those things, and they could seem judgmental. Whereas when I simply put that voice inflection down, so you want to try the low-carb diet, it gives this person the opportunity to answer back without feeling like there's judgment. Let's go into some more of these complex reflections. Here's a great way to rephrase. This change is really hard for you, and you hate how you act when you're dieting. To reflect the feelings. You are tired of not having enough energy, and you want to be a different kind of mom for your kids. Boy, that really brings in some emotion. That's also pretty forward moving. You want to be a different kind of mom for your kids. It allows that person to be able to see that there's something new and different that she could be. Using a metaphor. You've experienced that yo-yo effect of dieting, this up and down, and now you're ready to stop playing with this thing. Continuing the paragraph. So that mom says, my friend had tried that low-carb diet, and I'm thinking about doing it. You can simply add on to the end of her sentence, and you're wondering if this is a kind of diet that will work for you. That wasn't a question, and you're wondering if this is the kind of diet that's going to work for you? So you're wondering if this kind of diet will work for you. Voice inflection goes down. Double-sided reflection. In your comments, you had some great double-sided reflections. You've been frustrated trying to lose weight in the past, and you're looking for a new way to make this work. Getting both sides of that ambivalence in there. Use the word and. So very important. Even in your own speech, listen to the times that you use the word but and how you are an ambivalent person. And even speaking back to yourself, say that same thing with the word and see if that doesn't change the way that you view your own change. Using and is huge for ourselves too, okay? So, amplified. Losing weight might be one of the most important things in your life right now. When you amplify something, it helps the person see the importance of that. And like I said, you're taking a chance when you use an amplified reflection, because this might not be the most important thing in her life. Well, no, losing weight isn't the most important thing. I know that I need to have the money so that I can buy the right foods for myself and my family. That's the most important thing in my life. Okay, so that person is still going to tell you, even if your amplified reflection is not correct or it's too much for that person, they are going to tell you. So you're still not right and you can back off. If using an amplified reflection causes more resistance in the conversation, boy, the best way that you can back out of resistance is to acknowledge it. You can say, wow, it seems like that's something that I said really kind of upset you. I'm sorry for that. Tell me about that. Okay, so backing out, saying that you're sorry, can be a really great way to back out of resistance. And affirmation. Boy, it sounds like you've already put a lot of thought into this. Or you're really persistent and you're determined to find something that works for you this time. Coming alongside, losing weight's really tough. This has been a hard place for you. Okay, so coming alongside and going forward moving would be something like, losing weight has been really tough for you in the past, and you want to find something that finally works for you. That is a coming alongside, double-sided, forward-moving affirmative reflection. So when you're using reflections, it's not going to be just one or the other. You are going to be putting many of these elements, maybe even into one reflection. You want to reflect change talk. Your kids are really important to you, and so is your health. Both of those were huge places of change talk we heard with Mom. And a reframe. It really sounds like you're searching for a big lifestyle change. This isn't just a diet for you. You want to learn a new lifestyle. So see, big reframe again, forward moving in that conversation. These are all complex. They're going to invite that person to think more deeply and be able to bring more to the conversation so that you can help them get up that motivational mountain and get to a commitment of something that they might want to do that week to help make this change. Now, forward moving reflections. You're excited about trying something new. Sounds like you're ready for a whole new lifestyle. You've been stuck for a long time and you're looking for something new that will really work this time. You want to be more active with your kids. These are all ways of helping this client be able to see more about her future, and it really invites her to think forward. Most of the time, what people do is they think to the past. They think about their failures. They think about the things that haven't worked, and those things all pile up on their present and tell them, you can't do this thing. But when you use a forward-moving reflection, it invites them to think past failure. It invites them to think past rejection. It invites them to think past pain. And it lets them see that, wow, maybe something can work. Don't let someone's past mar their future. Okay, so anxiety comes from the past. And you can see anxiety and you can see frustration. Depression also comes from the past because that's pulling us back and it's this weight. I absolutely said that wrong. I'm sorry. Depression comes from things that happened in the past, and anxiety comes from a thought about the future. Worry and tension and concern for what's going to happen, and fear is huge in anxiety. So when somebody has depression and anxiety and they are all brought into the present, this is a true place of stuck, because the past is pulling you backwards and your anxiety won't let you go forwards, and so this is a true place of stuck. So it's very important to recognize those places and not let that past lie to this person anymore, but tell them the truth about what their future could be. Huge to be able to let somebody see outside of themselves. So we've got stabilizing reflections, which allows the person to feel heard. It keeps the person on the same topic. It keeps the person in the same mindset. And that's okay when you're coming alongside and when you want them to know and gain trust with them. When you're breaking down resistance or frustration in a conversation, stabilizing reflections are great. However, forward-moving reflections allow that person to feel heard, and it also invites them to consider what they can do next. You don't want them to stay in that stuck position, feeling like their past is always going to be with them, causing them failure. You want to invite them to have that change talk. So forward-moving reflections invite change talk. So here we go. Difference between a stabilizing and a forward-moving reflection. Thinking about losing weight is easy, but doing it's another story. Losing weight is really tough. This has always been a tough place for you. It seems like there's been a lot of attempts in the past, and they've always failed. Okay? That would be like a horrible thing to say to somebody, probably. But those would all be stabilizing reflections that would keep them in the same place. A forward-moving reflection is, and you can even say it with excitement. You can even put affirmation in your voice. You've thought about losing weight a lot, Now you want to finally do it. So even having that hope in your voice is really important with forward-moving reflections. I know that there's a lot of other examples that you can think about this. I have given you a forward-moving. Let me do one more, and then I think I'll talk about the forward-moving reflection exercise. So I think it's good for Joey to play soccer, and he loves it. But it takes away from his schoolwork, and it's hard getting him to the games and practices, and I don't really have the money to pay for his registration in those shoes. So a stabilizing conversation could be, you've got a lot going on, and soccer's just going to be one more thing to add to your schedule. Okay, this is coming alongside. This is acknowledging what you're hearing in this mom. Or a forward-moving reflection. It could be, these could be at different places in the conversation. It could be a different way that the mom says this. It could be what you're seeing in her as to whether you're using a stabilizing or a forward-moving conversation. And this is where your sixth sense has to come in. However, using forward-moving reflections usually ends up in a better place than using those stabilizing reflections. So keep that in mind. Here's a forward-moving reflection that you could use for this. There may be some sacrifices and hard work that's going to allow Joey to do something that he loves. Okay, so seeing something in this mom, to be able to see that, hey, these are places that have kept you stuck before. You can't figure out how to put all of these things together, and yet Joey really loves soccer, and it might be a good way for him to do his schoolwork, because he's going to have that exercise that he needs to kind of get himself out and get his brain working a little bit, okay? So you're reading a lot into this and seeing this might be a good place for Joey, or you might be seeing that Joey's manipulating his mom into wanting to play soccer. Hey, this would totally depend on what you say in this conversation of what you're seeing in this family and the attitudes that are brought into this, okay? So this is where all of that has to come into your conversation and what you're going to say next. So I've given you a forward-moving reflections exercise to do, and this is usually a really, really tough exercise to do. But please just kind of go through this. I really highly suggest that you do this in the week that we're going to have between now and next week. Think about what a stabilizing reflection could be for all of these statements. There's 9 of them that I've given you here, and then think about what a forward-moving reflection could be. You may find that there are some questions that you would like to ask after these statements. That's not a bad thing, but we are working on reflections right now, so please try to form reflections instead of asking questions. In a really good motivational conversation, here's something to think about. You will ask one question to every 3 reflections. That's a really, really good motivational conversation. Now, if at first you are starting to reflect, if you ask one more or do one more reflection tomorrow than you would have today, then you have made progress. When you can start to get into a place in your conversations where you are doing about half questions and half reflections, you're doing great. Okay, so just know that your goal, and this could be way up in the future, is to do 3 reflections to 1 question. I am now at a place where it's hard for me to ask questions because a lot of what I do is just reflect, 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 because I've just gotten so used to that. But that has been a long, long period of time for me to get to that place. Okay, so forward-moving reflections. Okay, when you can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This is really important because some of our families live in situations that aren't going to be changed anytime real soon. However, we always have the opportunity to change ourselves in the middle of our situations. And I think that this is a testament to the human spirit, that it's not the situation that always changes. That's what we want. We want more money. We want our kids to act right. We want teachers to teach our kids correctly. We want all of these things in our lives. But if those things are not opportunities for that situation to change, boy, it's got to be about us. And guess what? When we change and grow, it turns us into something beautiful. It really gives us the opportunity to see life differently, to have those different perspectives, and to be that positive person. This is something that you have to offer to your families, to allow them to change themselves. So we're going to I've got 15 minutes to talk about change talk. We'll see how far we get. I have a feeling that we are going to hit this again pretty hard next week, along with going down the other side of that mountain, talking about preparation and action stages where, hey, that's where we all want to be. That's what we want to be able to talk to our clients about. But how do we do that and strategize that well as well? So change talk is a primary vehicle for resolving ambivalence and promoting behavior change. It's huge to be able to hear that change talk because it represents movement towards change, at least in the thinking process. Now, I want you to think about this. There are at least 3 steps to change. Number 1, you have to have a thought about change. And that's what contemplation is. It's simply a thought. The second step to change is that you have to believe it. And that's where we have a high contemplator starting to move to commitment. There is starting to be a belief about the thought about that change. But there's a next step, because if that belief simply stays a belief and it never goes to the hands and feet, it never gets put into an action in their life, then it will never become a stable and improved lifestyle. There are a lot of people who believe they need to make a change in their life, but they never make it happen. And a lot of that is because of the fear of getting that thing out of their heart and moving it to their hands and feet. And that's where you get to come in. That's where you get to be that person who can start to break down those fears, because many of those fears are based on who that person has been told that they are. When in reality, they can become somebody completely different because of a perspective switch that you can give them. It's vastly important for you to know how important your role is in all of this. Because change talk is highly influenced by counseling style. So the safer of a person you are in a conversation, the more change talk you're going to hear from the people that you work with. If someone is judgmental and they look like they just don't have enough time for a person, or they're not respectful of the person, those kind of counselors, and I'm putting that in quotation, are not going to hear nearly as much change talk. So who you are in a conversation is very important to getting more change talk. This is where the person tells you what you would normally tell them. Wouldn't that be awesome if you could just sit back and listen and smile and say, wow, I was just going to tell them that, and they already told me. That's awesome. Because now there can be no resistance. Once the person comes up with that idea themselves, they're the one that thought of it. There can be no resistance around that thing. Okay, so let them tell you what you would normally tell them. And that involves patience. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes more into the conversation. All you got to do is shut up. Remember the gift of shut up? That duct tape that we want to put on our mouths, and let that person speak. A good motivational conversation, I've said this before, and I know that sometimes this is really hard, really, really hard, but it's 80% of the time the client should talk, and 20% should be our talk. That's why you want to keep your reflections brief. Okay, so sustained talk is any speech that favors the status quo, no change towards the specific target behavior that you have. And then change talk is speech that favors movement towards changing that target behavior. You want to listen to these 6 different types of change talk. These are called the darn C's. A desire to change, an ability to change, the reason to change, a need to change, the commitment to change, or the steps that they've already taken. So a desire would be words like, I want to, I would like to, I wish to. The ability to change, I could, I can, I might be able to. A reason to change, you know, I'd probably feel better if, I would have more energy if. And like that mom said, I could play with my kids if. Okay, so listen for those reasons or a need to change. A lot of times a need comes around health issues or it comes around financial issues. I need to, I have to, I really should, I must. We're going to talk about commitment talk next week. So these are commitment talk statements. I am going to, I will, I promise, I have to. Okay, these are all, when you start hearing those words instead of, I could try, well, I know I should, it would be a good idea if. Okay, those are somebody who's not as far up on the contemplation scale. But when you start hearing these commitment words like, I will, I'm going to, and even if there's more of a passion in their words when they're saying them, you know that they're getting to those stages of commitment so that you can start helping them to prepare to make the action. And then you want to hear about steps that have already been taken. I've already started to. I've actually tried. I've cut back. These are where they've already started to prepare to make some of these action steps and maybe have made action steps but have fallen back down the mountain again. All right? So every time somebody takes a step and they have a perceived failure, wow, that's a great way to learn, a new way to do something. So don't let anybody tell you that they have failed. They have only had an opportunity to learn. Let's see what Jimmy Buffett has to say here. Wasting away again in Margaritaville. Searching for my lost shaker of salt. Some people claim that there's a woman to blame, but I know it's my own damn fault. Okay, we're looking at this, and we hear this song, Margaritaville, and this is a fun song, right? I mean, he's just been in Margaritaville, and we know all the parrot heads and all that kind of stuff who go out and listen to Jimmy Buffett and have fun. But if we really take apart this song, there's a lot going on here. Wasting away again in Margaritaville. Wasting, wow. Okay, so that might be one way that I reflect back to Jimmy, wasting. That sounds like a tough place. Okay? Searching for my lost shaker of salt. I'm just going to give you a little heads up here. The shaker of salt that Jimmy Buffett is talking about here is not really a shaker of salt. They were at a restaurant somewhere in Mexico, and they put cocaine in the salt shaker, and it was getting towards the end of the night. And the waitress came up, and she picked up all the salt and pepper shakers at the end of the night, and they were searching for that lost shaker of cocaine. So that's what he's talking about here. He is searching for that high that he would get with cocaine. I know, I'm sorry I just busted your image of Jimmy Buffett, but, you know, some people claim that there's a woman to blame, but I know it's my own damn fault. See, this is where he's starting to take some responsibility for the things that have happened in his life. And this could be an affirmation. There's a lot of change talk in here. And to be able to reflect that change talk back to Jimmy Buffett, so you're seeing that this is your own fault. There's something different than you want in your life. You don't want that wasting feeling anymore. You've been searching for something and you're ready to find it. Okay, see how those are all ways that you can reflect back and add on those pieces of forward-moving action. I know it's always fun. You will never listen to a country song the same now that you know about motivational interviewing. When you hear a drinking country song, listen for those places of depression. Listen for those places of change talk in that person's voice. It's absolutely fascinating. I love taking apart songs and hearing that. So there are 15 different ways to elicit change talk, and in 4 minutes I'm not going to get through them. But I'm just going to go through them really briefly. So these are ways that you can start to elicit change talk. And what I'm talking about with eliciting change talk is ways that you can be in a conversation, or how you can ask a question or reflect in order to allow that person to have a response that's going to tell you what you would normally tell them. So one of the main reasons to do motivational interviewing is to be eliciting or evocative. So you want to evoke emotion. You want to evoke more of a response or more knowledge from them. So you want to ask evocative questions. those darn C questions that we just had up on the screen there. The desire, ability, reason, need, and a commitment. You can ask about those. So what might be the greatest reason you would want to make this change? On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you need to make this change in your life? Okay, so those all evoke differences, different emotions and different thoughts from the person. Ask for more detail. Tell me more. Great one. You know, I didn't understand it when you said, hey, you know what? If there is a place in a conversation where you are not sure that you're understanding what that person is meaning or saying, it's very important that you ask for more detail so that you can stay on the same page in the conversation with that person. Ask hypothetical if questions. So if you made this change, how might your life be different in 2 years? If that happened, then what? So remember this, asking those if questions is a great way to elicit change talk. And really what you're doing is you're just being curious along with your client. When you ask an if question, they're probably curious about what their life might look like on the other side of this thing. I'm just going to go really quickly through these ways to elicit change talk, and then we're going to hit this more next week. Ask a miracle question. Hey, if you snapped your fingers and stopped smoking, what would it be like? Start a sentence. So that made you feel, when you refer to it, that means, okay, and let them finish those sentences. Ask what they already know. So, hey, if you're already giving them information that they already know, all you're going to do is cause resistance. So tell me, here's a statement that you could make. Tell me what you already know about the health risks of using tobacco while you're pregnant. Okay, maybe they don't know anything about the health risks, or maybe they know something about the health risks. But if you talk to them about the health risks and they already know them, in the back of their mind, they're going to be going, I know, I've heard it 100 times before. So ask what they already know. Great way to elicit. Ask an example question. When was the last time you were really happy? What else happened? Or looking back, wait, back then, what inspired you to get your diploma? Back then, okay, so you quit once. How did that go for you? Or looking forward, how might your life be different if you, hey, in 2 years, if you did this thing, how might your life be different? So that's kind of like the if question. But you want to look forward and you want to kind of have some passion in that as well. And then querying the extremes. Using words like worst or never or most or greatest. These are a great way to query the extremes and really get more out of the client than what you've heard. As a natural human tendency with people, when we take the negative side of ambivalence, guess what? They're going to take the positive side. So if we take the negative side and we query that extreme, so smoking is something that you never ever want to stop doing. Well, I didn't say that. I mean, I might eventually think about it in the future. Boom, you've just elicited change talk. Okay? So when you take the negative side of ambivalence, and it usually works, sometimes it doesn't, but it usually works. Try that. This is a change you never want to make in your life. Or if you take the positive side of ambivalence, they might tell you about some of their barriers, okay? So you want to stop smoking tomorrow. Okay, you're querying that extreme. No, I didn't say that, but there are some things that I want to do to move towards that direction. Great way to elicit what's already inside of them. Ask what they already know. Oh, we already did this one. I lied. Here we go. Explore their goals and values. I told you that next week I'm going to give to you a values assignment that is really important for letting people know what their values are. Come alongside. This is where you empathize with them and let them know that you're okay with where they are right now. Use of silence. Oh my goodness, people. This is a really, really great way to elicit change talk, and it might be the most uncomfortable part of your conversation. But guess what? If you're uncomfortable, so are they. The next person to speak directs the conversation. Let it be your client. And a decisional balance chart, I'm going to go into this next week. This was one of the pieces of information that I gave you today, but I really wasn't sure we were going to have enough time, and we don't. But I will teach you how to use the decisional balance chart In the email that you got for the webinar today, there was also a link to a YouTube video about the decisional balance chart. I highly, highly suggest that you watch that video. It's a 10-minute video, and it teaches you how to use this decisional balance chart. This is a great way to speak with your clients. And then I will also teach you how to use the change ruler effectively to elicit change talk. So we'll talk about decisional balance. We'll talk about using the change ruler. But right now, the things that you have to learn before you can do them, for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. And this is where you get to be the mouse in the little red helmet there. And you get to go out and try to get these little pieces of cheese from your clients. I just used a metaphor there, by the way. But you have to start doing this stuff. Start using those reflections. Think about forward-moving reflections today. And I have a quote that I want to leave you with. When you start doubting yourself, remember how far you have come. Remember everything that you have faced and all the battles that you have won and all the fears that you have overcome. So remembering how far you've already come is really important to understand maybe how much farther there is to go, but it also gives you hope that you can get there. You can do this, okay? So next week, September 3rd, Thursday, from 9 to 10:30 is going to be our session 4. We're going to just do a quick review of where we've been so far. We're going to go back and we're going to work on this change talk. We're going to talk about rolling with resistance and then phase 2 strategies, which are commitment talk and action planning, and then we're going to wrap up the webinar. So we hope to see you next week for session 4 to wrap up all of this. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.